I suppose one of the things that I find kind of fascinating about this is that when you talk to a lot of people, they maybe kind of get it to some extent. Like, oh yeah, we should take better care of ourselves, of course. But like what Antoinette raised earlier was like, capitalism as a system really doesn't work for us. How do we transcend this? How do we kind of, build something better? And like, how do you all approach conversations when you encounter people who maybe have a more traditional or a different sort of leadership belief or philosophy? Because some people might interpret what we're saying as quite radical and revolutionary in a sense.
Happy to jump in there. So I did a lot of work in change management and transformation, and we had a couple of strategies to help identify some early adopters and work with the leadership team to role model behavior. And then you've got the laggards, down the end who don't want to change. And most of us spend all of our time and energy convincing the laggards, like, no, we need to change. This is the reason, the imperative driver to change, as opposed to nurturing the early adopters and the innovators. So my personal approach is now is just to try and surround myself with the people like yourselves in these conversations who share the same values, who share the same beliefs, and share the same energy. And I think if we can create movements, the word movement was used earlier on, and we'll support each other, because it's difficult to get off the treadmill. It's difficult to stand out from the crowd, and that's why we need to support and nurture each other. So that's my personal strategy of where does my energy go, where are conversations or partnerships opening up, and just put my focus there.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I love the fact that when you find that sense of resistance, or where you're, that there's somebody with an opposing view or somebody who sees the world differently, I just get really, really curious. That really just grasps me completely. And I'm like, I need to understand that, because that's my blind spot, that I can't quite see the world through your eyes. So just explain to me the perspective. But it doesn't mean that, I see it as combat or conflict, or, it's just somebody else's different perspective. It's seeing life through their lens. And then you might be able to find some common ground.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you always can. If a person feels seen, heard, and understood as part of whatever the transformation process is, suddenly they're on board. But then again, I'm not looking for difficult or different people. I'm just looking for where the energy is and to build on that energy. But if you're dealing with a senior executive team, there's always going to be a few people who are not that interested. But if we integrate the healing at the beginning in terms of the listening and the understanding, that just generates a whole new energy, doesn't it? So it's probably taking our feet off the accelerator as well, and just stepping back and saying, okay, let's look at the vehicle that's in motion right now and get to understand it and all its systemic bias. And I've experienced so much systemic bias, I feel, and I think every single person suffered in some way. So to just listen to them and hear them, and genuinely at a deep level, it just changes the whole opportunity. And then I think it's the whole thing, where are we going to? Where are we destined to arrive at? What is our current opportunity from an intrinsic resonant perspective? So again, we're not driving, but we're emerging. I think that does enable people to join, to come on board.
Yeah, I love that, Antoinette. I often talk about this concept with people, mostly kind of in the context, I suppose, of politics and racial relations, being from the United States and having a background in that sort of field myself, that, it's kind of about building a bigger tent. How do you bring people into it as opposed to having people excluded kind of on the outside? Because that, I think as you say, like, you don't want to drive people away. That's not the objective here. How do you bring them into what you're doing? So.
Absolutely. And I employ that, making sure people are seen, heard, and understood, and leading with curiosity to help to find that common ground, as you said, Joanne. And it's just so powerful. Antoinette, you said it, when you actually do find it, they are much more open to hearing my point of view, or going along with me in the actions I want to take. So it is so powerful, those two kind of ideals.
And then I also agree with Ronan, just ignore the laggards. they're so invested in their own point of view that they're only just don't want to change their minds. So yeah.
Just go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, just to quickly maybe jump in on that as well, because there's actually good evidence for ignoring the laggards as well. There was a good study done a couple of years ago of various movements, back to the word you mentioned, Jeff, and Special Olympics, who I'm working with, often described itself as a movement. It's the word we'd use most often. And what they showed in the research was that actually, if you reach 25 to 30% of people, you know, changing a mindset or changing a behavior, that's actually pretty much the tipping point. That, you know, they looked at a lot of social unrest and social justice movements over a period of time. So, you know, they showed, excuse me, that you don't have to bring everyone along with you to begin with. You just reach a point where the majority realizes that something is better than the way it has been. And I think that's when you start to see the systemic change that Antoinette's been referring to, where people, I suppose, reframe or remodel things in their minds and in their behavior compared to where they have been up to that point. And everything you said, all of you up to now, is more or less exactly what I'd written here. I wrote a couple of notes and it was like, listen to understand, not listen to respond, all those pieces that I truly do believe are really, really important. Like Wei, I've spent a lot of my last few years working on the idea of inclusive leadership and how you shift environments and shift cultures. And I do think that's at the root of it. I think if you truly engage authentically to hear where people are, and not just bring your own perspective, then you've got yourself a fighting chance of finding a way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And to build on what Dennis just said, I think one of the approaches I've always tried to instill on the people that work for me is you need to you need to take a more pragmatic approach, because everybody wants to hire a team of the most innovative, bright, brilliant people. It is hard as heck to manage all of them, right? Because they go in all different directions. And anybody that's worked in a corporation will say, at the end of the day, everybody's going to average out a 2.5 out of a 5, right? So you can't give everybody a high rating. So if you can get the 30% in the right direction, and you can figure out how to promote the other ones out of your organization, then you have a more sustainable opportunity to maintain your trajectory. I think it's you know, I think conceptually we all try to look at it as creating the most optimal team of creative individuals. But if you have a team of all scientists, then, you know, the engineers will sit on the side with nothing to do. So anyway. And that's where, you know, what we do is to try to get to a place of growth where everybody, the whole team, could move at the correct pace, so to speak.
There's another dimension for me as well. I mean, I love the fact they're all talking about understanding and listening to understand, and that whole process of bringing people out. And I think about that container as well, because I think there's been a lot of leadership development programs over many years that have done a lot of good work there, but we still haven't overcome the third-party competitive capitalism profit focus. There's still conscious businesses, but there's still, a lot of them are still grounded in this profit world. So I think re-engineering the container simultaneously with leading the people in terms of their own development, for me, is essential. And it just changes the entire game, because then we're shifting into a whole new environment, a new way of being, which is the whole behavioral thing that you were thinking about before, Ronan and Joanne. So yeah, there's so many dimensions that need to happen simultaneously. And what we've been doing up till now isn't enough, because otherwise we wouldn't be in this virtually tumbling into chaos type scenario which we have now.
Mm-hmm.